Once again, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. My name is Tatiana St. Germain. I am with Great People Management, founder and CEO. I'm an executive coach and talent advisor to organizations who strive to do better with their people strategy and their talent strategy. And today we're going to be talking exactly about that, how to achieve better results through better people. And in my world, it's all about measuring people, understanding people at their deepest level using assessments and implementing some of the strategies that I've picked up from research and my clients. Actually, I'm always learning from my clients. We will primarily be talking today about assessments and as tools that you can use to achieve better results and build a superstar workforce. My mission in life, in business, really is to build a world where people love to come to work. Can you imagine for a second what we could achieve if all of you people love to come to work? And it happened with every company in every industry. I'm trying to contribute my little part in partnering with people-centric organizations, great companies who know the value of people, to build that world, to help build that world. And great organizations understand that success begins with having the right people in the right places, have the right leaders in the right leadership positions, and having real conversations, real human conversations. Research and study after study tell us that best-in-class companies use assessments to achieve that level of success with their people. So there's something interesting going on with assessments, and we're going to unravel this today. But to back up for a second, why are people important? I know it's kind of self-explanatory question, but I think it came to the forefront even more so during COVID and after COVID, because so many organizations realized when half of your workforce walks away, you really can't have a company without people. People truly are the foundation of every business. And I love this quote too. You don't build a company, you build people, and then people build your company. And I actually attended a webinar yesterday, a SHRM-sponsored webinar, and then I didn't have time to add this information to my slides here today. But they were talking about the difficulty in the workforce that's going to continue it's going to stay with us. We've had declining birth rates for several decades. We have a new generational balance or disbalance, if you will. Younger people are not as loyal. They jump around more. And what a recent SHRM and Upwork study published by Wall Street Journal showed that it's mostly professional workers that are quitting. So that was a surprise in the study. Professional workers are quitting. And the number one reason, this was another study from MIT, number one reason they were quitting is because of toxic culture. And actually pay was number 16. So depending on your industry, depending on what type of workers you're having most difficulty with attracting and retaining, you may have a different empirical knowledge about this. And of course, the pay is important, benefits are important, but what's becoming more and more important is interactions, not transactions. What employees care about is the purpose, is their impact at work. They want to be in the right role where their talents are leveraged and they're not set up for failure. But they also don't refuse to tolerate toxic culture. They refuse to tolerate incompetent and toxic leadership. They want to work with trusting teammates. Trust is a big factor. Connectivity, sense of purpose, and having real conversations. Here's that slide about toxic culture. I want to give full credit to C-Suite Analytics for presenting this study. I'm not going to go into all the talent retention ideas that many of our clients went through. I'm sure you've tried a couple of different things in the last 3 years. Better benefits, let's throw money at them, let's give them stay bonuses. But time and time, we found that those things don't have a sticking power. They do not help us retain quality talent. In fact, kind of come back to bite us in the end. So what do we do? When I attend conferences, and again, reading research, what I'm hearing from different industries, what seems to work is to have stay interviews, provide just-in-time feedback. There's a lot of leadership development conversations going on right now. Our business, our executive coaching and leadership development business is exploding because organizations realize that you cannot have good stay interviews or even selection interviews or provide good just-in-time feedback or foster the culture of trust without phenomenal leaders in place. And leaders don't know what they don't know if they've not been invested in. You have to invest in your people. It's no longer a question of whether or not to invest in or not to invest in people. You have to invest in people, your people strategies, and especially your leaders. So leadership development is number one priority, and assessments, because now we need to demystify what is it that's going on with people, what makes this person stay, what makes this person successful and this one not successful. Lots of conversations around that. So but why do we need assessments? This is really the crux of the main point of today's conversation. It's because people are complicated. We need to measure them. We can't see who they are. Wouldn't it be wonderful if people were walking around with all their strengths and weaknesses written all over them, kind of like in a computer game, in a Jumanji game? You approach them and it pops up with all their strengths and weaknesses, as well as what motivates them. Unfortunately, it's not the reality. So we need to rely on science, good scientific tools to really dig into the 90% of what makes the total person. People are like icebergs. What we see through day-to-day interactions is just the tip of the iceberg. And this is what we observe. Even if you work with someone side by side for years and years and years, you still only see about 10%. The 90% is what's going to make it or break it. It's not all bad, but we do know that it's not the tip of the iceberg that sank the Titanic. Think back to the height of COVID, March, April timeframe of 2020. How many people, how many leaders fell apart spectacularly and publicly because they were miscast for the job that they were in? And yet there were so many other people that stepped up to the plate unexpectedly. Well, I challenge you to think differently. This was always there. It should have been expected. It should have been measured. We should have put the right people in the right positions, especially leadership positions. But shoulda, coulda is not going to help us. Let's look forward. And as we look to the future, let's implement good, solid, reliable assessment tools to measure people so that you're not surprised. When ship hits the sand, you know what to expect from your people. You know everything, the good, the bad, and the ugly, their potential, and everything they bring to the table. Of course, you can do this on the assessment, on the selection side. And I like to look at the assessment as a selection process as a three-legged stool, because we're frankly evaluating past, present, and future. Past is what they've done in the past, their resume, a background check. The screening process that includes a background check, typically it's great. It's great to have this information. However, if you think about the background checks, it only shows you what people have been caught for. It does not measure the future. And we're trying our best to predict the future success, by looking at the past, what they've done in the past, and also how they show up in the present, their appearance, their face-to-face interview. So what organizations are looking for now is better, more scientific, reliable, unbiased information to enhance the present piece, to enhance the interview process. And again, that's where assessments come in, and we'll talk about different assessment types too in just a moment. But I just wanted to highlight that that's what we're really doing. We're trying to predict that future leg of the selection three-legged stool. What are their attitudes? Do they have the propensity to steal, to not show up? What is their work ethic? Do they have risky behaviors? What is their potential? Do they have the ability and the potential to grow within the organization? Also, job fit. Job fit is an old concept, but it's often overlooked. The hiring process is often sacrificed and gutted on the altar of just hiring a body, because we don't always have the luxury. In some positions, we only have a one or two candidates. So it is difficult. It's understandable. However, you still need to have the information about that one candidate that you know full well you're going to hire. You need to know exactly what you bring to the table. You don't have 2 years to get to know this person. People leave at the drop of the hat. People leave within weeks if they don't like what they see. If you don't engage them on their level, if you don't understand them at their deepest level. I've been doing this for 20 years. I don't think in 20 years I've ever seen or been in this time where understanding your employees has been so critical. It's never been this critical. I mean, it's always important, obviously. I've been in this business preaching this, but I'm so passionate about it, telling leaders that you just can't afford a mistake. If in the past you could have probably afforded a hiring mistake or promotional mistake, you literally cannot afford this anymore. So assessments help you in the interview, enhance your behavioral interview, and they also help measure success, future success potential, and predict the future, frankly. Different assessment types help you measure different things. And there's many different predictors of success. If you, for example, measure interests only, it gives you 10% chance, improves your chances of hiring somebody who is going to be successful 10%. Education, when we look at education, when we provide training, additional training, maybe you're looking to grow your incumbent employees. Interview, solely relying on the interview gives you 14% chance of hiring a top performer. 14%, that's it. But when you include experience, reference checks, and there's a variety of different ways to do reference checks, which we're not going to go into the details on that in this seminar, but perhaps in a future one. But when you measure behaviors and the cognitive piece and add some of those interest measurements, understand the training needs, you are increasing your success rate to about 75% combined. That means out of 4, doing quick math here, out of 4 candidates, if you were after 4 out of 4 hires, 3 will work out as a top performer. Think about the kind of impact that it would have on your business. According to Harvard Business Review, job matching approach more accurately predicts job success than any other commonly accepted factor. That includes examination of their education, their experience, or job-related training. And people who are well matched to their positions are 2.5 times more productive. If we're talking about professional positions and leadership positions, think of the impact it's going to have. It's not just about productivity. It's about building trust and building a great culture, organizational culture. And I'm sure you guys are talking about organizational culture all the time. And how to build it, how to measure it. I'll just make a quick comment on the culture. I've always felt like organizational culture was more of a result of different strategies and initiatives implemented by the company. But it is an important conversation to have, because culture and core values and the steps that leaders have to take, it's an important topic. It's part of leadership development. So to sum up different types of evaluations, assessments, both pre-hire and working with your existing talent pool, your existing bench strength. When you're evaluating bench strength, you want to look at attitudes, assess risky behaviors. You want to look at your culture, ensure that you have engagement and job fit to predict success. All right, let's jump into different assessment types. Oh, and by the way, I launched right into the presentation. I forgot to mention, if you have questions, please feel free to use the chat or the Q&A box. I think either one should work, and I will be monitoring this on my other screen. Or if you want to provide a comment, feel free. So let's talk about different assessment types. I'm sure you've encountered different ones. There's skills tests, there's cognitive tests, there's emotional intelligence assessments, and then a bunch of different tools that you know by name, like Myers-Briggs and DISC and personality tests, and normative assessment tools like Caliper and PXT Select, which is a Wiley and Sons Wiley Publishing brand. So let's talk about the types. Two main types, and those are the two main types of assessments that create most assessment myths. So that I wanted to address that. Let's talk about the 4-quadrant personality assessments out there. It's such a hot topic. So many companies use them and misuse them and abuse them in their decision-making process because they believe this is the magic bullet, the magic pill that's going to tell them everything they need to know, and they rely too heavily on that information. It's so popular that HBO released a documentary about personality tests called Persona, which I highly recommend. It was interesting for me to watch. And they revealed that personality tests, as most personality test technical manuals will tell you, are not validated for selection. You should not use personality tests for selection. Post-employment, be my guest. You can use any assessment out there, but pre-employment environment is highly litigious environment, and you must comply with an entire rule book guidelines by the Department of Labor and EEOC guidelines, which we will briefly cover in just a moment. So let's talk about the 4-quadrant assessment types. And by the way, there's over 4,000 DISC-based assessments out there. It's the same science 4-quadrant personality test that puts people in one of the 4 buckets, which is extremely useful. And then these assessment companies repackage them in different ways to provide different reports, different insights that they derive from essentially the same scientific approach to measuring somebody's personality, which is a checklist of adjectives. It's a self-descriptive evaluation. I often get asked this question, why is it that we cannot use personality tests for hiring? Well, there is a pressure, psychological pressure that exists when we're going in for a new job. And we're looking to provide socially desirable responses to put our best foot forward. So if you're applying for a sales position, for example, and you're presented with a question or a list of adjectives to choose from, are you going to select reserved or outgoing, determined, assertive? I mean, think about it. If you really want this job, it's fairly easy to discern in which way this assessment is going. Where is it? Which path is it taking us down? So they're very transparent and therefore fakeable. And if it's a self-descriptive evaluation, they're very short, like 15 minutes. Again, they're wonderful post-employment when there's no psychological pressure for going in for a new job, and people are more at ease and are more likely to represent themselves correctly, how they see themselves. But on the pre-employment side, that information is not useful. I hope this makes sense, and we can talk a little bit more about it if there are additional questions. The other type of assessment evaluation that is very popular, and it's not a new science, but it's very more sophisticated science, if you will. It's normed assessment. Normed assessments take situationally framed questions, and when people answer those questions, they norm those responses on a bell curve so that you, the leader, the hiring manager, can see how this person scores compared to the rest of the population. This is what's most useful in team building and self-awareness, in leadership training, and particularly in job fit, when we're trying to do job matching and in selection process, because it's not the person telling you how they feel or think about themselves. You see how they are relative to other people. This is what allows you to take your top performing individuals in a key position, measure them with this assessment to create a benchmark of success, and then measure candidates or incumbents to this and match them to your top performers. Gives you the ability to identify gaps very quickly, reliably, and scientifically, and build success benchmarks for all positions in the company. We're actually going to go through a case study using one of these tools, and I will show you how this works. So those are the two main differences, and there's only a handful. I can count on probably, well, we'll give 2 hands, how many normative assessment tools are out there on the market. So it's a very small, limited marketplace, and there's these types of assessments are usually much longer. They are called often total person evaluations because they have different a battery of questions. They take about an hour to complete. There's a whole list of reports that come with those assessments. So it's a much more sophisticated process. And they're specifically validated for hiring, but you can use it for post-hire as well. The PXT assessment, PXT Select assessment, which is a Wiley tool, for example, allows us to capture occupational DNA of people, because when we compare those personality tests, 4-quadrant personality, like DISC, for example, the number of possible outcomes on a DISC assessment is 16. Because even though it's 4-quadrant, 4 buckets, but we look for the top, for 2 dominant traits on DISC. And then on PXT Select or any other caliper is another normative assessment tool that's phenomenal. It measures 20 traits on a scale from 1 to 10. So the number of possible outcomes is 20 to the power of 10, which after I Googled that number, that's the number of possible combinations, over 10 trillion. So as far as we're concerned, when you, that's really a comparison between personality and normative assessments. You're measuring the uniqueness of the person. That's as close as you can get to capturing somebody's occupational fingerprint or DNA. Now, as I promised, I was going to mention or walk through this Employer's Guide to Good Practices very briefly. I encourage you to download the full document from the Department of Labor ONET site. It lists 13 practices that you need to, well, keep in mind that you're compliant with when you're selecting an assessment tool for selection. It's Employer's Guide to Good Practices when using assessments and testing in the workplace. It's actually really insightful document. And we have a summary of 13 key points. So if you feel free to drop again in the chat or Q&A box if you would like to receive that. We can send that to you after the webinar. One of the first key components on that guide, the Department of Labor recommends using assessments in a purposeful manner. So before you even select an assessment tool for your initiative, pre or post employment, make sure that you know what you want to accomplish and why, and you have it documented. It's really critical to have a very clear understanding, and then select the tool that's actually going to address that clear purpose, not something that was recommended by somebody else. Just because it worked for somebody else doesn't mean it's going to work for you. Establish the consistent content, and here's again that phrase, you use whole person approach to evaluation, because just using, say, a skills test, just because somebody knows how to operate machinery or knows how to do Excel spreadsheets doesn't give you enough indication whether or not they're going to be a good worker, whether or not they're going to stay with you, whether or not they have the integrity and work ethic to work and contribute to good morale on your team. The next one is, again, I'm using the three-legged stool, but in this case, it's 1/3 of your decision. Even if you use a combination of assessment tools, such as skills tests, which are really great for pre-employment, by the way, it's easy to prove to the DOL and the EEOC why they're job related. But let's say you use a skills test, an integrity evaluation, and a job matching tool that are specifically validated for hiring. Combined, that information should not represent more than 1/3 of your decision. It's difficult to do because it's the most unbiased and most scientific piece of the data you're gathering, but it's 1/3. You still have to put on your thinking cap and conduct a good interview, which the assessment will actually help with that. And you have to look at the potential. You have to look at their past experience, especially if it's a situation where you're hiring for a key position and it's difficult to find skilled individuals to fill that role. So use your judgment, but you are responsible for compliance. It's not the assessment company that's responsible for compliance. It's the organization that's using assessments. And once again, it's EEOC, and the guidelines are continuously changing. Just last year, there were a bunch of new guidelines implemented by EEOC and ADA, especially with more prolific AI in the testing and interviewing, video interviewing, facial recognition software. All of those are major caution, red flag from the perspective of EEOC and Department of Labor, and also ADA. So you want to make sure you have the technical manual, have all the documentation for the assessment tool you're considering, to make sure that if there was ever a question, and you were questioned in your selection practices, make sure that you have the technical manual and you bring it to the judge. Use only reliable assessment tools and procedures. A reliable assessment is not always valid. If you think about a tape measure, it's a reliable instrument because no matter how many times I measure this desk, for example, it's going to give me a consistent measurement. But if I use that same reliable tool, like a tape measure, to measure a person, measure their height, and base my hiring decision based on that, that's not a valid application. Always use caution with time tests because they produce adverse impact on protected groups, mechanical aptitude tests, and as I already mentioned, personality tests as well. Keep good records. I wanted to quickly go over a case study using a PXT Select assessment tool and what makes it unique. Some of my clients use it, and I put myself in the shoes of a hiring manager and to changed up some information there to protect the innocent, and I will walk through how we use this assessment in the hiring and onboarding process to ensure retention and integration with the team. So what makes PXT Select unique? It measures the uniqueness of every individual because it's a normed assessment. It employs computer adaptive testing technology, so it's accurate, valid, reliable, but it also is shorter, and it has a very good candidate experience. It's validated according to Department of Labor standards for pre-employment, easy to use. It provides multiple reports to the hiring manager and the leadership team, all included in one cost. And we have custom performance models that we can build, which are those job benchmarks, success benchmarks that you can create, or patterns of success, if you will, so that you can match people to those hiring standards. It's very cost effective and secure, and there's training and support and validation studies available with it. I'm not going to go through all of the reports, of course. I just wanted to quickly demonstrate how one might implement an assessment tool. But there's 13 different reports that come with the PXT. So first off, what PXT measures and why it was so attractive for this organization. It measures the total person. So it does have 5 cognitive measures, 9 behavioral traits, and 6 motivational interests. on a scale from 1 to 10. This is what one of the report's graphs will look like. The shaded area represents the success benchmark for the position that we're looking to place Camilla in this case. So Camilla is our only candidate for this position in this scenario. We look at her job match, and it's not fantastic. Everybody's talented and everybody's challenged in their own way. So implementing or keeping in mind that assessment is only 1/3 of your hiring decision, we're going to proceed to the interview. We're not going to use this 67% match to the job as a basis to disqualify our only candidate, only viable candidate. Plus, she has some job relevant experience. So let's see if she's actually able to address some of our concerns that the assessment raised at the interview, to see if she's self-aware, if she's already been able to implement some strategies, because frankly, if she's self-aware and she knows about her quirks, my coaching job is half done. So we proceed to the interview. The interview is going to be very focused because we're going to use the interview guide. And it actually gives us interview questions for about two interview questions for each scale that's measured. What we find out is that she's very well spoken, very self-aware, and extremely enthusiastic about work. So we see that she has work ethic, she's aware of her tendencies, and she's worked hard to mitigate some of her weaknesses. So that's a big plus. After the interview, we need to make a decision. We can take it a step further and generate a coaching report, because I want to understand what is it going to take of me as a hiring manager to work with Camilla, to get her to the level of performance that I'm expecting, even though she's not a perfect fit for the role we hired for her. So I'm going to generate the coaching report, and it tells me everything I need to know about Camilla. This is just 2 snapshots of 2 pages. The report is about 16 to 18 pages long, and it tells me everything I need to know and gives me management tips. So it's really useful. There's also bottom line comments for those hiring managers who don't like to read a lot. At least they can get to the bottom line. The next step in the process is, I know as a leader, I have kind of a unique personality. So I want to make sure that we find our stride very quickly and we hit the ground running, working together very well, and not wait 6 months to 2 years to figure out how to work together. So I'm going to generate a manager employee report. And these are actually my scores with this candidate to demonstrate that we are similar in some respects and different in other respects. And then the report is going to generate comments for us how to find ways to complement each other and achieve better results, so that we don't see each other's differences as difficulties. We're psychologically wired to trigger the fear factors of the brain whenever there's something unknown or something different from what we know about ourselves. When it's a person who is polar opposite of you, you don't understand how it's going to manifest in behavior. The reptilian brain kicks in and starts to fill the void in your brain with information void. You don't know what's going to happen with this person. You start to make assumptions. You start to make judgments. And they're very time consuming to undo. Trust me, I'm speaking as an executive coach, leadership coach, working with leaders constantly on assumptions that were built during those initial stages of working together with somebody. You assume. So this report tells me about Camilla's tendencies, what are my tendencies, where we might butt heads. So let's find ways to complement each other. And I'll give you an example here on accommodation, for example. I am extremely straightforward, so I need to let her know that I'm going to be very straight with her. And I'm going to provide her just-in-time feedback, and I'm not going to shy away from direct comments. If I come across too strong, it doesn't mean that I'm angry. I need to preface this, but it's also a check for myself. I need to explain to her the intent behind my words when I come to her to hold her accountable. She is much more agreeable and more accommodating, so she may take offense to certain things. She doesn't like conflict, and she will shy away from direct conversations. I need to know that about her to create comfortable climate for her to come to me to air concerns. And all of this is written in the reports. Think of how powerful this information is to receive up front, frankly, before I even make the offer. But then you can use this information during onboarding to have a much better working relationship. So in this scenario, she's hired. And in the first 2 weeks, we're going to sit down and talk about her career potential, her career path, her strengths, her limitations, and some of the reasons why we hired her. The result of this conversation, she feels valued, appreciated, and what's most important for younger millennials and Generation Z is now she sees herself in our organization. So I don't have to go through this again. She's going to grow. She's going to be committed, engaged, or in the very least, let's be real, I have a higher statistical chance that she will be this way because I'm doing everything I can. That's all we can ever do. Can't control other people, but you as a leader and as an organization should and can control what you do, what tools you use, what strategies you implement. So on this career pathing report, I just kind of matched her against some random positions I had in the database to demonstrate where else in the company she might be able to move. In your case, it might be just a career path within the sales department or a career path within engineering department or whatever. Also in the first 2 weeks, we want to make sure that she's fully incorporated into the team and she feels like she knows everybody. We have complementary relationship and she knows other people and other people know her. So we're going to schedule a 90-minute lunch to talk about our team. We put everybody who took the assessment, who's going to be interacting with Camilla on this team report. Oops, sorry. And we're going to talk about our similarities and differences. Come to me if you need this. Don't come to me if you need that. This report also provides the narrative. What does each of these traits look like for this team? Points to consider, and how do we work together? Real feedback from my clients who use this process during onboarding, use this team report, tell me that this is the best onboarding process they've ever had because after 2 weeks, people feel like they've worked side by side for 2 years because we're digging into really deep, personal, behavioral stuff and set the expectations. And again, provide information so that we can prevent assumptions and work better together. And there's other reports that can be made available for other initiatives. There's 360 reports and 360 tools. There's work ethic assessments that are available. But use us. You can reach out to us on LinkedIn, on our website, greatpeoplemanagement.com, and feel free to leave any questions you have while I'm wrapping up here. This is time for Q&A. But we are your resource for all talent-related conversations. So if you just want to chat, reach out. I'm happy to talk. If you want to learn about different assessment tools, I've personally used about a dozen different ones, so I can give you some feedback on that, how and when to use them, what's appropriate, what's not appropriate, employee selection, retention strategies, culture, core values, of course, leadership development, any of those conversations. Assessments really help you gain insights into your people that you would otherwise not have, or it takes you a really long time. Even if you're a good reader of people, it takes a long time to figure out somebody, and they still surprise you. That's what typically happens. So when you're empowered by this great science, this information, you can start attracting people instead of losing people, retaining people instead of bribing them to stay with bonuses, develop them instead of managing their issues and performance, and start creating something new instead of constantly fixing. And I really believe that recruiting strategy and retention strategy are no longer two separate initiatives. It's one and the same. What we're looking to build is a company of choice. You want to become an employer of choice. Employer of choice organizations attract great talent, so they don't have to go out and recruit. And a lot of recruiters in HR departments are actually finding now that they are almost like marketing engines or an extension of a talent brand marketing as opposed to recruiting. So it's a big shift that we need to be aware of. And it starts with measuring what you have, doing talent audits, having the right people, having the right leadership, and having these conversations and investing in your people, in your teams, in your organizations. And then you have a much better chance of building a phenomenal company. We really believe that great people make great companies. All right, do we have any questions? Any questions at all? I did have one question that was submitted earlier with the registration about hourly workers. So what assessments are appropriate for hourly workers, blue collar workers in manufacturing, construction, drivers? That's an excellent question. There are assessment tools that are valid for hiring, screening tools that can measure a couple of different things. There is a work ethic and integrity assessment that measures integrity, work ethic, reliability, and propensity towards substance abuse. That reduces your risk of hiring people that have same attitudes as recently released prison population. And I know it sounds strange, but it's interesting. I'm actually doing a demo of that assessment tool in a couple of months. So stay tuned for that, or go to greatpeoplemanagement.com and go to events page and look for upcoming events. There's an integrity assessment demo. It's a quick 30-minute demo that I will be doing. There's also a behavioral evaluation that's not as long or as involved as PXT Select that I demonstrated today. It's a safety assessment, so it's going to measure risky behaviors and basic skills. So that's another tool that I would recommend, and we can talk about that. But yes, please reach out to me if you joined, whoever asked that question. Reach out to me, we can talk about that. All right, let me see. I don't believe there are any more questions. Thank you so much for attending. Please enjoy the rest of your day. Bye-bye.